beyond dementia, connecting our lives to help us survive.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Barney Nelson. I'm with the Dementia Action Alliance Advisory Committee. And today we have as a guest speaker, Dr. Al Power, who's going to talk about anger and agitation. Al is a board-certified internist and geriatrician, and he's named to the Schlegel-U Chair in Aging and Dementia Innovation at Schlegel-U Waterloo Research Institute on Aging in Ontario. He's also the author of 2 books, Dementia Beyond Drugs and Dementia Beyond Disease. So welcome, Al, and thanks so much for appearing here and giving us some good information like I know you will.
Thanks so much, Barney. It's great to be back on the podcast.
Well, let's start off with one question, which is, anger and agitation. Those are what some people might describe as normal, if you will, emotions. But they're also sometimes can be symptoms of particular types of dementia. How do you kind of define that? And how do you draw a line and say this is more dementia versus normal type of anger that all of us type of have? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Barney. And I think it's a great place to start because I've come to look at these things a little bit differently than a lot of the medical profession. And so I want to explain that distinction because it may seem small, but I think it's really, really important. First of all, it is true that we all get angry or frustrated at times. It's also true that it seems to happen more often in people who are living with a diagnosis of dementia. So those are facts that are pretty evident. But what much of the medical profession does is they say, therefore, that dementia is the cause of something like anger or agitation. And I look at it a little bit differently. I believe that the things that might make you angry are very similar to the things that would make me angry as a person not living with a diagnosis of dementia. I think that what happens is that dementia affects how we're experiencing the world, how we're processing information. It affects our communication skills at times. It can affect our coping skills at times. And so when presented with a stressful situation, a person who has a cognitive disability might have more difficulty getting themselves out of that situation and might be more likely to become upset. So that's a slight distinction, but I think it's a really important one because to say that these are caused by dementia leads you to say it's the person's problem. We need to use some sort of an intervention, which often means a medication, because we're treating the disease. Whereas what I'm saying is, you know what, there's a deeper cause. The person is upset. The dementia may be making it hard to cope, but there's a deeper cause. And if we can address those deeper causes, then we can find better solutions that are more durable and often drug-free. And I think that that's really important. I think that's a big underlying factor behind the over-medication of people with dementia in society is that belief that I think needs to be shifted. One other comment I'll make really quickly, and that is that I'm always very sensitive to language. And the terminology you're using, of course, is common terminology, but the more I use words, the more I think about how they would make me feel. And so there's a lot of words I've kind of let go. And one of the words that doesn't sound horrible on the surface, but I've kind of let it go is actually the word agitation. I think even to say somebody's agitated is it carries a value, kind of a negative value. It's kind of a judgmental term, like they have a problem. And so I might say people are frustrated. I might say they're angry. I might say they're distressed. But I'm really looking for subtle changes in wording that might take our minds away from saying it's your problem that I have to fix you somehow. So that's just one tiny thing that I would say.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. It's interesting. I really love what you're saying about the importance of being aware of when we're trying to medicate away problems, which really don't necessarily solve the problem, if you will. I've never met a skilled nurse or a care person working in assisted living type of situation that wanted to medicate their patients. They all absolutely did not want to do that. So I think a lot of people are really in line with you with what you're saying. So it's fair to say then that the the fact is there's a reason for the anger to begin with, a foundation, if you will. And is it fair to say that sometimes dementia can be sort of an accelerant towards that anger that's coming out and making it even at a higher level than what it might have been before? Is one term like an accelerant? Is that one way to look at it, kind of?
I think that's really a great term, actually, kind of like throwing kerosene on a fire or something like that. Yeah, it's a great term. I've used something similar, and this my comments about anger are part of a larger issue I have with the whole idea that the medical profession uses of terming these different expressions as behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. Once again, the suggestion is that the dementia is actually causing these things. And what I have said that's very similar to an accelerant is that dementia is an enabler of distress. The disability of dementia is an enabler of distress or a modifier of how we respond to distress, but it is not the root cause in the vast majority of cases. So yeah, I love the word accelerant. I think that's a great way to describe it.
Well, it's interesting when I have Lewy body dementia, and so I have times where I'll be on the meter of anger, I'll be at 2 or 3, and then suddenly I'll find it just going much, much higher, 8, 9, or God forbid, even 10, in a very quick fashion. But the reality is the reason why it started to begin with were anger issues that I had, things that were causing me anger, whether I would have dementia or not, is one of the things that I've noticed. And then it just goes to a whole nother type of level, which is kind of why I think of it almost in this accelerant type of term. But that's kind of what we're talking about. I mean, you have to deal with what's causing that anger to begin with. Yeah. And in my case, lots of times it's the same issues that's causing that anger that I have. It's buttons, if you will, that are being pushed in some form or fashion that are making me angry, which would have happened no matter what the situation or my own personal health situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there are actually 2 situations we have to deal with, any of us in a situation like that. Number one, we have to get ourselves out of the mindset we're in at that moment when you're at an 8 or a 9 and get back to a place where you can kind of breathe and think, in a more effective way. And then the second one is to manage those buttons, manage those triggers, to try to exert as much control as you can in a situation to keep them from pushing you from 1 or 2 up to 8.
Well, let's talk about some compensating strategies, because I think that's kind of where you're going right now. I know I shared with you a little bit earlier that we were given some good advice from a doctor about with Lewy body dementia. Sometimes if you can think of Lewy as almost this separate type of thing, and you're putting it over on the side saying, I'm going Lewy right now, or your care partner might be saying, I think you're starting to go Lewy right now. If we can take that and move it over here to the side and almost make it a third party type of thing, and then just continue to go on. And we've now become aware of it. We know what it is. Now let's move on. Let's put this over here and let's kind of keep going, or maybe take a break or something like that. Have you heard of a compensating strategy like that, or any other types of compensating strategies?
I haven't heard of that, although we do have a great friend, Chuck McClatchy, who's spoken publicly a lot of times about Chucky, his alternate ego, his alter ego, which comes out sometimes. And I think sometimes it can be very helpful to kind of personalize and separate that aspect. And I guess the only caution I would give about that, once again, getting back to my little distinction, is it's okay to identify Lewy as your accelerant, but not to try to identify Lewy as your cause, because once again, there's something deeper there that Lewy is just running away with. So Lewy is somebody who takes something and just runs around with it when he shouldn't, and so that's kind of the way I would see that. And on that, before we get to the compensations, I think that you also are alluding to something else too. I have another friend with Lewy body dementia who has talked about that accelerant aspect too, how he can go from 2 to 10 very quickly. And so, there are different kinds of dementia, and the party line, once again, is that certain kinds of dementia are more likely to cause these types of things like anger, or to use the word agitation. And the ones that classically will do that are the ones that affect the brain that is supposed to be in charge of emotional control. And so people that have the frontotemporal types of dementia in particular are felt to express emotions, positive or negative, much more readily. Some people during certain types of Alzheimer's also have more of a what they call a labile or a movable affect, so that they may express joy or sadness or anger much more readily. But I think, once again, you can look at it that way, but I never like to make hard and fast rules, because everybody is an individual. And so I think that a lot of it, once again, looking at dementia not as the cause, but as the accelerant, I would say a lot of it has to do with what that dementia is doing as far as your ability to process and cope with a situation. So if you have a kind of dementia, for example, where communication and understanding words is difficult, then when you're in a situation where someone is speaking too quickly, or where you don't understand what they're telling you, or they don't understand you, then that might be your trigger, Right. Whereas if you're with somebody else who is disempowering you, who's making choices for you because they don't think you're capable, that can be frustrating, and that might be your trigger. Or in the case with Lewy body, often people have more rigidity or more slowness in processing. So I'm not sure that Lewy body more specifically affects the emotion centers. But if you're having trouble with those aspects and people are outpacing you or are trying to get you to do things more quickly than you are able to, then that can be really an accelerant as well. So I think that another way to look at it is just to say, what types of disability is your particular dementia causing, and what are the situations that will really bang on that sore spot that you can find yourself in. Those are the ones that are really going to get you going, I think. And I think that's looking at it more individually rather than pigeonholing this type of dementia versus that type.
Yeah, and it seems like it makes sense to make sure that you understand exactly what you're saying and what are those things, those triggers, if you will, that you talked about, but also that your care partners understand that too, and you both are on the same page in terms of, here's the kind of things that can create these situations, this anger and all this, and here's how we're going to try and handle them if they do come up, and make sure we're all operating on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
So as far as compensating, as far as managing triggers, and I'll use that term, the mindset that has helped me to understand how to support people is what I've described. That's a lot of the work I've been doing as a professional, working with people living with dementia. A lot of what I've learned about how to compensate, how to manage, comes from the people I consider the true experts, which include people living with the diagnosis of dementia, because it is hard for me to know how a person is experiencing the world if I don't have the brain changes they have, if I don't have the types of disability they have. And I can put myself in a wheelchair and have somebody push me around, or I can put Vaseline on my glasses and see what happens when I can't see or hear as well. But it's still not quite the same as the nuances of having a changing brain that is so individualized and so more subtle than what we often do with our experiential trainings. So I've gone to peer networking, and this is why I think Dementia Discussions is such an amazing platform, because you have peers who are suggesting things to each other. But I have a few suggestions thanks to some people I've networked with, actually when I work up north of the border in Canada, when I'm able to go there. And there's a wonderful group that formed many years ago called the Murray Alzheimer Research and Education Program, or MEREP. And the researchers at the University of Waterloo began working with people in the US and Canada living with dementia, doing research that they would help design. And one of the things they did was they came up with a group of guides. And I'm going to hold one up here. These are called By Us, For Us guides. So guides written by us, for us. So guides written by people with dementia, for people with dementia. And over the years, they have come out with probably 15 or 20 of these guides. And these guides now sit, and the MERIT program now sits at the Research Institute for Aging, where I work part-time. And so those resources are available there, but they're also available for free on the web. They can be downloaded. These booklets can be downloaded as PDF files. And I think when we get to the live broadcast, maybe we'll publish the website so that you can exactly get those. But there's this wonderful book here called Managing Triggers that people with dementia made for other people with dementia. And just to sort of outline what's in here to show, there's a great introductory section here by Brenda Hunem, who is one of the people that started this whole By Us, For Us process. And first of all, they have those quick tips for managing in the moment. And they have things like breathing deeply, or counting to 10, or just clearing your mind. If they might talk about getting out of a situation into a quieter place, a calmer, quieter place where you don't have external stimuli that are helping, that are accelerants as well. Finding something that you know calms you, like listening to some music, or finding something that will help pull you away and help you step back from that heat of the moment so that you can begin to calm yourself. And as Brenda states in the intro, all of us, with or without dementia, when we are upset, thoughts don't come as quickly. And even myself, I've had many episodes where I've been angry and I've hung up the phone or maybe slammed the phone down. And then a half hour later, I think, oh, this is what I should have said. But, I couldn't think of that in the moment because I was just so upset. And so giving ourselves time to process and step back is really important. And then they have a wonderful guide that talks about different situations you might find yourselves in. And they put the triggers like that. So they have, for example, crowds and loud noise, what you can do when you're triggered in that situation. And they have both what you can do and what those around you, your care partners, can do to help you. They have another one, being rushed or not included in plans. So that gets to the outpacing, it gets to the disempowerment. What to do in public situations like shopping and restaurants. What to do if you're being tested or quizzed or pushed for answers. And then they have a whole section on communication, when there are communication difficulties triggering you. And environmental things like room temperature, weather, being a passenger in a car that you're not controlling, getting lost or losing things, changing abilities, being judged, degraded. There's just pages and pages of this. And then they also have separate guides on a couple of those, enhancing wellness. So they talk about the importance of diet, exercise, sleep, on getting yourself in a position where you're not so likely to be triggered. And they have a great one on communication. And one of the things I do in my seminars is talk a lot about the very basics of communication, because I think so often people who are supporting people living with dementia don't take the time to go through those communication basics, and they set the situation up for problems right from the get-go. And so those are just a few things, and I don't want to go over our time because I know we want lots of time for discussion. But these are a few things, and this is a great resource which we will share. But I'm looking forward to discussion. I can't wait to hear what the participants on the call have to share, because they're going to also give us so many great ideas. I'm sure I will learn from this call as much as I help others.
Well, can't thank you enough for spending time with us. We look forward to going through that resource with you and with the folks. And for those of you that are watching, you can make sure you visit the Professional Insights YouTube channel to see this video. And again, Dr. Power, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us and sharing such great information. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Barney. It's been a pleasure. I'm always glad to be involved with this program whenever I could. And I'm looking forward to hearing what people have to say.
We're working to shift the stigma from challenge to change, how people exchange, so we live our